The starship Endeavour glided silently through the endless void, its engines humming with quiet efficiency. Captain Ella Morrow stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the swirling colors of distant nebulae. She had led many missions in her career, but this one felt different. There was an air of mystery hanging around this planet, a planet that no one had ever bothered to name. It was uncharted, untouched, and, as they soon discovered, forgotten. The mission had started like any other. Humanity had discovered strange signals coming from the planet, deep within an uninhabited sector of space. Scientists speculated that it could be a long-lost civilization, and Captain Morrow was tasked with leading a team to investigate. What they didn't expect was the sight that greeted them as they approached the planet's orbit. From space, the planet looked like any other, rocky, a little barren, with seas that shimmered faintly under the distant light of its sun. But as they descended into the atmosphere, the true nature of the planet became clear. The surface was scattered with ancient ruins, monuments to a race long gone. Once proud cities were now crumbling, overtaken by wild plants that had grown unchecked. The remains of an advanced civilization were scattered across the landscape, their technology far superior to anything humanity had yet encountered. The crew of the Endeavour landed on the surface, stepping out into the dust of a world that had been abandoned for what seemed like eons. The air was thin but breathable, the sky overcast, as if even the heavens had forgotten to care for this world. Captain Morrow took a deep breath as she surveyed the landscape. She had read the reports, seen the scans, but nothing could have prepared her for the eerie silence that hung in the air. Her first officer, Lieutenant Jace Carter, approached with a worried look on his face. "Captain, the signals we're receiving. They're not like anything we've encountered before. These people were advanced, and yet there's no sign of life anywhere." "Keep your focus, Jace," Captain Morrow said, her voice steady. "Let's find out who they were and why they're gone." They walked through the ruins, their footsteps crunching on the dusty ground. The ancient buildings towered over them, their once beautiful designs now broken and decayed. As they explored, they discovered more signs of the civilization that had once thrived here. Holographic projectors long out of power, grand libraries, now just empty shells, and devices that had once been capable of feats beyond human comprehension. It wasn't long before they found the first clue, a strange stone tablet half buried in the ground, covered in faded alien symbols. The symbols seemed to pulse faintly with some kind of energy, even though the tablet had not been touched in centuries. Lieutenant Carter carefully picked it up and handed it to Captain Morrow, who studied the markings. "I've never seen anything like this," she murmured. "These people, they were once connected to the stars. But where are they now?" The signal they had been following had led them here, to this long-forgotten world. And yet there was no sign of the people who had sent it. The crew had expected to find survivors, or at least clues to what had happened. Instead, they found only silence and decay. As the day wore on, they discovered more and more about the Valkyrie, the name they had given to this once great race. According to the data they recovered, the Valkyrie had been a peaceful species, focused on knowledge and diplomacy, not war or conquest. They had reached out to other civilizations across the galaxy, offering alliances and sharing their wisdom. But somehow they had been left behind. Their pleas for help had gone unanswered. As centuries passed, their once glorious cities crumbled, and their people vanished. Captain Morrow felt a pang of sadness. She had seen many dead worlds, but this one felt different. The Valkyrie weren't just a race of long-lost history. They had been abandoned, left to die alone by those they had once tried to help. And yet, their technology, their knowledge, it was still here. The Endeavour had only scratched the surface. "Captain," Carter said, his voice breaking the silence, "we've found something. You should see this." Morrow turned to him, her heart racing with curiosity. She followed Carter through the ruins until they came to a large chamber, its entrance hidden beneath a pile of rubble. Inside, the walls were lined with intricate carvings and glowing symbols. In the center of the room stood a massive pedestal on which rested a single, perfectly intact device, something that had survived the ages, untouched by time. "This is it," Morrow said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is what we've been searching for." The crew gathered around as Morrow carefully examined the device. It looked like a small sphere, etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer and change as if alive. It was clear that it had been important to the Valkyrie, perhaps the key to understanding what had happened to them. But why had they left it behind? As the crew stared at the device, they felt a sense of duty, a sense that they were not just here to study the past, but to protect something much larger than themselves. They had found the remnants of a civilization that had been ignored, but they would not do the same. The Valkyrie had been forgotten by everyone, but not by humanity. Captain Morrow stood tall, her resolve firm. "We're not leaving here until we've uncovered everything. These people deserve to be remembered. We won't let their legacy fade into the stars." As the days passed on the forgotten planet, Captain Ella Morrow and her crew continued their exploration of the Valkyrie ruins. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. This civilization, though advanced, had fallen into decline over centuries. Their once great cities lay in ruins, and their technology was aging, much of it no longer functional. Yet despite the desolation, there was something undeniable in the air, something that hinted at a lost potential. The humans had already discovered a great deal about the Valkyrie's history. Their records, though incomplete, spoke of a peaceful race, driven by curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge. They had once been a beacon of hope, reaching out to other civilizations to offer help, build alliances, and share wisdom. They had never been a race of conquerors. Instead, they believed in diplomacy, unity, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. But as Morrow and her team sifted through the archives and interacted with the planet's ancient technology, they began to understand a harsh truth. The Valkyrie had become victims of their own peaceful nature. They had reached out to the stars, hoping for companionship and cooperation. But when other civilizations saw them as weak, they turned their backs on the Valkyrie, and one by one, the Valkyrie's alliances began to dissolve. Slowly, their once vibrant world had faded into obscurity, abandoned by the very ones they had helped. Among the ruins, a sense of sadness hung in the air, as though the planet itself mourned its lost inhabitants. Despite all their knowledge and achievements, the Valkyrie had no way to save themselves. And now, as the humans unearthed the remnants of their legacy, it became clear that the Valkyrie were more than just a lost species. They were a race in need of rescue. The humans had only come here to explore. They had no intention of playing the role of saviors. But Captain Morrow couldn't shake the feeling that this was something greater than a simple mission. There was a responsibility now, a duty to protect these people, or at least the memory of what they had once been. As Morrow stood among the ruins, her crew working tirelessly around her, she realized that the task ahead was not only about saving the species, it was about ensuring the Valkyrie's legacy would not vanish into nothingness. One afternoon, as Morrow and Lieutenant Carter were reviewing some of the most recent findings, they stumbled upon something that would change everything. They had found a hidden chamber beneath a ruined palace, where a device unlike anything they had encountered sat dormant. It was larger than anything the Valkyrie had ever made, an object that seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. "What do you think it is?" Carter asked, his voice filled with wonder. Morrow studied the device closely. Its surface was covered in alien symbols, some glowing faintly, others cracked with age. "It looks like it's been waiting for something," she replied, almost to herself. Together, they carefully removed the debris that covered the device, revealing it fully for the first time in centuries. The moment they did, a low hum filled the chamber. The device activated, and suddenly, holographic projections filled the room, showing images of Valkyrie technology at its peak. "These are their final records," Morrow said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "This is what they hoped the galaxy would remember. The holograms displayed the Valkyrie's scientific achievements, their peaceful missions, their hopes for the future. It was as though the device had been waiting for someone to uncover it, someone who would understand what had happened and why the Valkyrie had fallen into obscurity. The projection showed Valkyrie ships soaring through the stars, their diplomats meeting with species from across the galaxy, offering peace and wisdom. But the images shifted, growing darker. One by one, their allies began to turn away. Trade routes were closed. Requests for help were ignored. The once bustling cities became quiet, then deserted. The final image showed a solitary Valkyrie standing alone on their planet, the lights of distant ships disappearing into the black void of space. This was their legacy, Carter murmured, awe and sorrow in his voice. They didn't want to conquer. They just wanted to help. But they were abandoned. Morrow nodded, her heart heavy. The Valkyrie's gift had been peace, but the universe had not been kind to them. Now, humanity stood at a crossroads. What could they do to honor the Valkyrie's memory, to protect what was left of them? Captain Morrow understood that the task ahead was not just about reviving the Valkyrie. It was about carrying their message forward. Humanity had the power to bring peace, to show the galaxy what true cooperation could look like. But first, they would have to protect the Valkyrie's last hope, their legacy. And that was a responsibility Morrow wasn't sure she was ready for. But she would face it, just as she had faced every challenge before. With determination, she turned to Carter and the rest of the crew. We're not leaving here without making sure they're remembered. Whatever it takes, we're going to give them the future they deserved. As the days turned into weeks, the crew of the Endeavor became increasingly absorbed in their task. They had not expected to become the guardians of a forgotten race. Yet here they were, tasked with saving the remnants of the Valkyrie civilization. The decision had not been easy. There were those on the ship who questioned whether it was worth the risk, whether they were even capable of taking on such a responsibility. "You do realize what we're doing, right?" Lieutenant Carter asked, his voice filled with uncertainty as he sat in the crew lounge. "We're trying to save an entire species that doesn't even exist anymore. What if we're just chasing ghosts?" Captain Morrow sat across from him, her eyes fixed on a holographic map of the Valkyrie homeworld. She had heard his concerns and the doubts of others on the crew. Some questioned whether it was even possible to restore the Valkyrie civilization, given the state of their planet. But Morrow had already made up her mind. This was not just about saving the Valkyrie. It was about saving their legacy. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity could be more than just conquerors. They could be protectors. "I understand your concerns, Jace," Morrow said, her voice calm. "But we're not just chasing ghosts. We're protecting something that matters. The Valkyrie were the galaxy's last hope for peace, and they were abandoned. We can't let that happen again." Carter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get that, but how do we even start? We can't just rebuild everything they lost." "No," Morrow replied, "but we can start by showing the galaxy what they were, and by ensuring their wisdom doesn't vanish forever." The crew had made the decision to help the Valkyrie, and they had no intention of turning back. But as the Endeavor continued its mission, it became clear that the Valkyrie were not the only ones who had forgotten the past. The galaxy itself seemed unwilling to acknowledge the lessons of the past, the need for unity, peace, and cooperation. As the crew of the Endeavor worked tirelessly to restore the Valkyrie's legacy, they found themselves facing not only internal doubts, but also external resistance from those who saw the Valkyrie's ideals as outdated, even weak. "You're wasting your time," one of the other ship commanders said during a routine check-in. "The Valkyrie's methods are old. The galaxy is moving forward. Diplomacy doesn't work anymore. The Valkyrie couldn't survive because they didn't fight back." But Captain Morrow stood firm. "The galaxy may have moved on, but we haven't. And we won't. We'll show them that peace isn't weak. It's powerful." Morrow's words struck a chord with her crew. They weren't just trying to restore a civilization. They were standing up for something much larger. Together, they would prove that humanity, and the Valkyrie, had something worth saving. And in the process, they would begin to rebuild not just a race, but a future for the galaxy itself. As the Endeavor continued its mission on the abandoned planet of the Valkyrie, Captain Ella Morrow and her crew began to realize the true magnitude of the task they had taken on. What started as a simple exploration mission had transformed into a profound responsibility, one that stretched far beyond saving a single race. The Valkyrie had not only been a peaceful species, but their legacy was one that could change the future of the entire galaxy. Each day brought new discoveries about the Valkyrie's history, technology, and way of life. Their archives, stored in ancient, nearly forgotten data centers, told a story of a species that had once been a shining example of cooperation and diplomacy. The Valkyrie believed in the power of peaceful negotiations, in finding common ground with other species, and in solving problems through understanding rather than conflict. They had spread across the stars, sharing their knowledge with others, building alliances that spanned entire star systems. Yet, as Morrow and her crew uncovered more, it became clear that the very qualities that had made the Valkyrie a great civilization were also the reason they had been left to wither. Their reluctance to engage in war, to assert dominance, had made them vulnerable. Other species, driven by greed and ambition, had turned away from the Valkyrie's ideals, viewing them as naive and weak. Slowly, the Valkyrie's influence faded, their allies abandoning them one by one. In the end, they had been left alone, stranded on a dying planet, with no one to turn to for help. But Morrow refused to let that be the end of their story. She couldn't help but feel that the Valkyrie's message was more important now than ever before. In a galaxy torn apart by endless conflicts and power struggles, the ideals of peace and cooperation were more valuable than ever. The Endeavor had the chance to carry the Valkyrie's torch, to show the universe that it was possible to build a future without constant war, a future where understanding and diplomacy were the foundations of progress. "I've been thinking a lot about the Valkyrie," Lieutenant Jace Carter said one evening, as he and Morrow sat in the quiet lounge of the Endeavor. The stars outside the windows twinkled softly in the vast darkness. They believed that peace was the way forward, and now we're the ones who are supposed to carry that message. But do you really think it's possible? Morrow looked out the window, her expression thoughtful. The weight of the question was heavy. Could peace really survive in a galaxy as chaotic as theirs? Could the lessons of the Valkyrie truly change things? "We don't have a choice," Morrow said, her voice steady. "The Valkyrie didn't fail because they were wrong. They failed because no one was willing to listen. But we can change that. We can be the ones who listen. The galaxy needs something different. It needs a future where peace isn't a dream, but a reality." Carter nodded, though the doubt still lingered in his eyes. The galaxy was not an easy place. Wars had been fought over resources, power, and territory for millennia. And while the Valkyrie's message was pure, it was also fragile, easy to ignore in the face of aggression and greed. But as the crew of the Endeavor continued their work, Morrow could see the spark of belief growing in her crew too. They were starting to understand that this mission was not just about saving the Valkyrie, but about proving something to the galaxy. That peace could still be a force. That diplomacy could be stronger than might. One day, while reviewing data from the Valkyrie's ancient archives, the crew discovered something remarkable. Among the records was a blueprint for a device, one that could amplify the power of peaceful communication across vast distances, perhaps even bringing entire star systems into peaceful cooperation. It was an idea that had never been fully realized by the Valkyrie, but it had the potential to change everything. "This is it," Morrow said, her eyes wide with excitement as she looked over the blueprint. "This could be the key to bringing the galaxy together. If we can get this technology working, it could allow us to communicate with distant civilizations in ways they've never imagined. Show them what peace could look like." The crew worked day and night to understand the device, piecing together the broken technology with their own resources. It was slow work, Many of the components were damaged or degraded over the centuries, but slowly they began to make progress. Every day, they could feel the weight of what they were trying to accomplish. This was no longer just about finding out what had happened to the Valkyrie. It was about shaping the future. As the device neared completion, Morrow couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. If they succeeded, it would be the first step toward fulfilling the Valkyrie's dream. It would be a beacon of hope for a galaxy that so often seemed lost in darkness. But even as the crew celebrated their progress, there were still doubts to face. Not everyone in the galaxy would welcome the Valkyrie's ideals. There would be those who saw the rise of peace as a threat to their power. There would be those who resisted change, who clung to the old ways. Morrow knew that their mission would face challenges, but she also knew that the Valkyrie had shown them the way forward, the way to a future built on understanding, not conflict. As the device finally powered up for the first time, the crew gathered around, their faces filled with awe. The holographic projections flickered to life, showing images of distant civilizations, their people staring back at them, surprised and curious. "We're not just building a device," Morrow whispered, a sense of awe in her voice. "We're building the future." The device would not only allow the humans to communicate across vast distances, but it would allow them to send the message of peace directly into the hearts of other species. It was the Valkyrie's legacy, now in the hands of humanity. And together, they would carry that legacy into the stars. The device, a combination of ancient Valkyrie technology and human ingenuity, hummed softly as it powered up. For the crew of the Endeavor, this moment was nothing short of a breakthrough, a glimpse into the future they had fought so hard to create. It was a symbol of hope, a tool that could carry the message of peace across the stars. But despite the excitement, Captain Ella Morrow knew the hard part was still ahead of them. The device had to be tested, and the galaxy had to be ready to hear the message. "We've come a long way," Lieutenant Jace Carter said as he watched the device's holographic interface flicker to life. "But do we really know if it's going to work? If it reaches out to other civilizations like we think it will?" Morrow studied the device, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't know," she replied honestly, "but we won't know unless we try. We have to believe that it's possible." The Valkyrie believed in the power of connection, of dialogue, and so do I. The device, designed to amplify communication across vast distances, had the potential to reach species light years away. It could broadcast the ideals of peace and cooperation, allowing the people of the galaxy to see what the Valkyrie had once believed, what humanity now believed. It was an extraordinary chance to change the way the universe interacted, to show that peace could be a stronger force than war. For the next few days, the crew of the Endeavor worked tirelessly, preparing the device for its first transmission. They ran simulations, checked every system, and made sure every connection was secure. Each passing hour increased the anticipation. Captain Morrow's heart raced with both excitement and uncertainty. Could they really make a difference? Could they truly change the galaxy with one message? When the time finally came, Morrow stood before the device in the ship's control room. The crew gathered around, their faces filled with equal parts hope and trepidation. Carter stood beside her, offering a reassuring nod. "Captain, it's all ready. Whenever you're ready to send it." She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "We've come this far together. Now, let's show the galaxy who we are." With a final press of a button, the Endeavor sent the device's signal into the deep reaches of space. The hum of the machine faded into the background, replaced by a deep silence that seemed to hang in the air. Morrow and the crew waited, watching as the signal spread out like ripples in a pond, each pulse carrying the message of the Valkyrie and humanity's newfound resolve. At first, there was nothing. The empty expanse of space remained silent, the message seemingly lost in the vastness. But then, slowly, tiny sparks of light began to flicker across the console. The device had made contact. "They're responding," Carter said, his voice full of wonder. The holographic screens lit up, displaying the images of distant worlds, strange alien species staring back in surprise. The device had connected with civilizations far from the human homeworld. The faces on the screens were varied, some humanoid, others completely alien, but all shared the same look of curiosity. For the first time in centuries, the message of peace was being heard. Morrow felt a lump form in her throat as she watched the faces on the screen. The Valkyrie's dream was no longer just a memory. It was becoming a reality. The galaxy was listening. "Hello," a voice came through the speakers, alien but clear. "We hear you. What is this message you bring?" Morrow took a step forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We are the humans of Earth, and we come with a message of peace. The Valkyrie, the species that once reached out to the stars in search of unity, have left behind a legacy. We carry that legacy forward. We believe that the galaxy can thrive together, not through conflict, but through understanding." The message echoed through space, carried by the device to countless distant systems. For the first time in generations, a peaceful message of cooperation and alliance was being heard across the galaxy. The crew of the Endeavor waited anxiously for a response. The first few moments felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, one by one, more faces appeared on the screen. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued, but there was a shared sense of openness in their expressions. "We have heard your message, humans," one voice said. "It has been a long time since anyone has spoken of peace, but we are willing to listen. What is it that you propose?" Morrow exchanged a glance with Carter. They had taken the first step, but it was only the beginning. The Valkyrie's ideals were not easily embraced, but they had sparked something, a conversation, and that conversation was a powerful force. "We propose cooperation," Morrow said, her voice unwavering. "We propose a future where alliances are built on mutual respect, where conflict is avoided, and where knowledge is shared for the betterment of all. Together, we can build a galaxy where peace is not a dream, but a reality." The silence that followed felt heavy, as though the weight of centuries of conflict was being considered. But then, slowly, a message began to appear on the screen, this time from a different civilization. The words were simple, but they carried a weight of significance. "We agree. Let us begin." Tears welled up in Morrow's eyes. It had worked. The message had been received. The spark of peace had ignited. The crew of the Endeavor stood together, silently watching as the galaxy began to respond. This was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, and not every civilization would be ready to embrace peace. But they had started something that could change everything. Captain Morrow turned to her crew, her heart full. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "The galaxy is listening, and together we will make it a place where peace is possible." The response to humanity's message was overwhelming. Messages from all across the galaxy began pouring in, some cautious, others eager, and a few downright skeptical. Captain Ella Morrow stood at the helm of the Endeavor, staring at the endless stream of alien faces that now appeared on the device's holographic screens. It had only been a few days since the initial transmission, and already, entire systems were responding. It was as if a door had been opened that had long remained locked. "I never expected this many responses so quickly," Lieutenant Jace Carter said, his voice filled with both excitement and disbelief. "It's like we've sparked something." Morrow nodded, her mind racing. The vastness of what they had just done was settling in. "We've shown the galaxy that there's another way. But it's not going to be easy. Some of these species, they've been at war for centuries. Change is never simple." One of the first messages had come from the Athel, a species that resembled towering, crystal-covered giants. They had been at the forefront of a galactic alliance for peace long ago, but they had retreated into isolation when the galaxy descended into chaos. Now, they were listening, but would they act? "We must be careful," Morrow continued, her gaze fixed on the screen. "This is just the beginning. There are still factions out there that believe in power, in strength. They won't be so quick to listen. Her thoughts were interrupted as another message appeared. This one from a species known as the Trinari. They were smaller and more insectoid in appearance, with exoskeletons that shimmered under the lights. The Trinari had a reputation for being fiercely independent and distrustful of outsiders. "We have heard your message, humans," their leader's voice crackled through the communication system. "And we are intrigued. But trust is not easily earned. What assurances do you offer that you do not seek to conquer, to rule, as so many others before you have?" Morrow leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "We do not seek conquest. We seek cooperation. We believe in a galaxy where strength is found in unity, not division. The Valkyrie showed us that it is possible. We are offering you the opportunity to join us in a peaceful future." The Trinari leader's face remained unreadable. "We will consider your proposal. But know this, actions speak louder than words. Prove that your intentions are true, and we will be open to your vision." The message ended, and Morrow sighed. It was a step in the right direction, but the Trinari were known for being slow to trust. They had to show that humanity's actions were consistent with their words. The road ahead would not be paved with easy victories. "We've got work to do," Carter said, his tone thoughtful. "We need to reach out to as many species as possible, and we need to show them we mean what we say." Morrow agreed. They couldn't simply rely on messages. They had to be present. The Endeavor had already traveled to several nearby systems, offering aid to planets in need and extending humanity's hand in friendship. But they needed to do more. They needed to build alliances, one step at a time. Over the following weeks, the crew of the Endeavor engaged in diplomatic missions, traveling to distant worlds, offering technology, medical supplies, and even knowledge about sustainable energy sources. With each mission, they encountered new species, some curious, others wary, but all willing to listen. The human message was being heard, even if it was not yet fully embraced. On one particular mission, they visited the planet Loval, home to a race of intelligent, peaceful amphibians. The Lovalians had been isolated for centuries, unwilling to interact with other species after a devastating war had nearly destroyed their civilization. They were hesitant to trust any outsiders. "We have seen the destruction that conflict brings," the Lovalian leader, a tall figure with translucent skin, said as Morrow addressed their council. "We are afraid that your message of peace may be nothing more than another form of control." Morrow met the leader's gaze, her voice unwavering. "We are not here to control you. We are here to offer a partnership, a shared future. We've seen firsthand what war can do. But we've also seen that peace is possible. We want to help you rebuild, not just as individuals, but as a part of a greater community of civilizations." The Lovalians hesitated, exchanging glances. But then, one of the council members, an older amphibian with deep, wise eyes, spoke up. "Perhaps it is time we take a chance," they said, their voice soft but firm. "We have suffered long enough in isolation. If your words are true, we will join you." A feeling of triumph washed over Morrow as the council agreed to become part of the growing alliance. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Another species, another world, embracing the message of peace. But as the Endeavor moved on to its next mission, Morrow couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come. There were still powerful factions that would never agree to peace, and if humanity was to succeed in uniting the galaxy, they would need to be ready for the challenges that lay ahead. "You've made great strides, Captain," Carter said one evening as the crew gathered in the mess hall. "But we both know that the hardest part is still ahead of us." Morrow nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The galaxy is listening, but it's going to take more than just words to bring us all together. We have to show them what we stand for. We have to lead by example." The crew of the Endeavor knew that the path to lasting peace would not be easy, but with every new alliance, every step forward, they could feel the weight of history shifting. And perhaps, just perhaps, They could change the future of the galaxy, one world at a time. The days that followed felt like a blur. Captain Elamaro and the crew of the Endeavor had made remarkable progress, but the challenges ahead seemed even greater. The galaxy was listening to humanity's message of peace, but the road to lasting unity would not be easy. Some species had embraced the idea of cooperation, but there were still those who doubted, those who feared what change could bring. Morrow knew the hardest battles were yet to come, not battles of weapons, but battles of trust and belief. The ship's communication console buzzed with the latest message from the Athel, the towering crystal giants who had once been leaders in a peace coalition long ago. Their message was cautiously optimistic, but filled with questions. They wanted proof of humanity's sincerity. They wanted to see that the promises of peace were not just words, but actions. It was a challenge, but one Morrow was ready to face. "We've made a lot of progress, but the Athel are demanding more," Lieutenant Jace Carter said, looking over the message with a furrowed brow. "They want us to show them how serious we are. They're not going to take our word for it." Morrow leaned back in her chair, thinking deeply. "They're right to be cautious. We're asking them to trust us, and that's not something that's given freely. We'll have to prove that we're not just talking about peace. We're living it." The crew knew what had to be done. Over the past few weeks, they had continued to build alliances, sending out humanitarian missions, offering resources, and always sharing the message of peace. But it was clear that the Endeavor couldn't do it alone. They needed to work with the species that had already joined them, to show the galaxy that cooperation was the way forward. "We've done a lot for the Athel and others already," Morrow said, as she looked at the crew gathered around the table. "But it's time to take the next step. We need to show them that we're committed to more than just words. We need to show them what peace can truly look like." The plan was simple. The Endeavor would lead an expedition to a nearby system, one that had been plagued by conflict for centuries. It was a system that had been torn apart by constant fighting between two powerful factions, neither willing to negotiate, each believing that they alone were right. If humanity and their allies could broker peace between them, it would be a clear sign to the galaxy that peace was not just an ideal, it was possible. The crew of the Endeavor prepared for the mission with determination. There were risks, unknowns that made many nervous, but there was also a sense of purpose, a belief that what they were doing could change everything. Morrow knew that if they could make peace here, with two factions that had fought for generations, the message would be undeniable. As they arrived in the system, the tensions were palpable. The two factions were on the brink of full-scale war, and every attempt at diplomacy had failed in the past. The Endeavor's mission was clear: bring the factions to the table, negotiate a ceasefire, and prove to the galaxy that peace could be more than just a dream. "We've been waiting for something like this," one of the faction leaders, a tall and proud alien with metallic skin, said as Morrow and her team arrived at the diplomatic station. "But we've heard promises before. Will this one be any different?" Morrow met the leader's gaze. "It will be different. We're not here to take sides. We're here to offer a way forward, a way that benefits both of you. War doesn't solve problems, it creates them. But peace, true peace, is built on understanding and cooperation." The two factions were not easily swayed. Their leaders were hardened by years of conflict, each unwilling to yield even an inch. But Morrow knew that if they didn't take the first step, the cycle of violence would continue, and all their efforts to bring peace to the galaxy would be in vain. Hours turned into days as the negotiations dragged on. The crew of the Endeavor worked tirelessly, offering compromises, suggesting solutions, and always reinforcing the idea that peace was the only way forward. It wasn't easy. Tempers flared, and at times it seemed like the entire mission might fall apart. But through it all, Morrow and her team remained patient, persistent, and unwavering in their belief that peace was possible. Finally, after days of intense talks, the breakthrough came. The factions agreed to a ceasefire, not just a temporary pause, but a lasting agreement to begin rebuilding, to put aside old grievances, and work toward a shared future. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the end of the challenges ahead, but it was a start. Morrow stood with her crew on the bridge, watching as the message of the ceasefire was sent out to the rest of the galaxy. It was a moment of triumph, a moment that proved the message of peace was more than just an idea. It was a living, breathing possibility. "Captain, we did it," Carter said, his voice filled with awe. "We really did it." Morrow smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "We did it together. This is just the beginning. There's still so much work to do, but we've shown the galaxy that peace is not just a dream. It's real." The Endeavor set course for its next mission, ready to continue spreading the message of peace. The road ahead would be long, and there would be many obstacles to overcome. But Morrow and her crew were more determined than ever. They had proven that change was possible, and with every new alliance, every new act of cooperation, they would continue to show the galaxy that a future built on peace was not just possible, it was within reach.